I want to start by saying that I'm not an activist, not a social justice warrior, not an expert on current events or social issues. But I'm a person who cares for the people around me and is committed to bringing unity within diversity. I've never personally been the victim of injustice, though I am Greek and the great-grandson of a man who was burned alive in front of his family in the catastrophe of Smyrna. I'm the grandson of a man who was dressed in his sister's clothing to save his life because all the men and boys were being killed. They were forced to swim to sea to save their lives. They swam out to ships that were waiting to rescue them. Injustices have been befalling human beings from the start and throughout history. I'm deeply moved when I think about what my forefathers went through, but as I never met them, it seems to be in the distant past. Do our hearts become calloused because injustices have always existed? Do we learn to accept injustice as something that is happening to someone else? What can I do about it? And how do I move forward from here? I'm a 17-year-old with goals and dreams who is trying to see down the path that leads to my future. I want to clearly see myself completing my college education, fulfilling my aspirations as a musician, and someday having a home and a family. As I look in the direction of my future, I see my path expanding into a network of intertwining highways, which appear to be riddled with obstacles. Obstacles that I cannot avoid, but that I must face. As I stand at the precipice of my future and attempt to plot my course, I must consider the problems that plague our society. Problems of poverty, discrimination, unfair wages, lack of opportunities, problems in the education, healthcare, and justice systems. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in his letter from a Birmingham jail that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He then expounded upon this profound statement by saying that we are caught in a network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly.
Yeah.
This is absolutely true. We cannot ignore issues because they do not affect us personally. Eventually, we will be affected personally if nothing is done. There was a well-known poem written by Martin Niemöller, who was an outspoken opponent to the Nazi movement in Germany during World War II. It writes, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me."
Yeah.
Injustice exists. It has already violated our brothers and sisters that we are not directly acquainted with. But if nothing is done, it will harm our friends. If nothing is done, it will take our neighbors. If nothing is done, it will be knocking at my door and yours, looking altogether grim and locking us in shackles. Hence, let us take action against the injustices that haunt our fellow human beings and help to set them free from the chains that bind them. But what must be done? And how do we approach it? Dr. King gave us a method to follow. He said, in any nonviolent campaign, there are 4 basic steps: collection of the facts to determine whether injustices are alive, negotiation, self-purification, and direct action. Collecting facts is perhaps the most crucial step because it is the very first one. In gathering facts, we must not jump to conclusions or necessarily accept things at face value, especially in this day and age of propaganda. It was novelist Arthur Conan Doyle who said, "There is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact." Dig deep to get at the truth, because it is the truth that sets us free.
Yeah.
If collecting facts is not done with great care, then the remainder of the campaign will be compromised. Facts must be represented with honesty and integrity so that it can properly be determined if an injustice has taken place. The next step is negotiation. Once a specific problem is identified, leaders in the community must sit down at the table with the powers that be and offer viable solutions and practical actions that will bring change, help, and opportunities to the oppressed. One quality that is necessary for negotiation is humility. Famous jazz trumpeter Wynton Marsalis said that humility is the doorway to truth and clarity of objectives. Humility gives us a clear vision of what we want to achieve because we are being honest with ourselves and with others. Now, I do not mean humility in the sense that we think less of ourselves and accept injustice. Humility is rather the absence of arrogance. It is treating others with respect. Humility can be summed up in one word: love.
Yeah.
It opens the door for effective communication. Dr. King said so magnificently, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." As a musician, I have been taught to go through a process of self-examination in the practice room. It is a process of removing the dross from my playing in an effort to create a sound that is pure and valuable. These means can be applied to social issues as well. The third point in Dr. King's model is self-purification. This is done in preparation for direct action if negotiation has failed. If we skip this step of self-purification, we are at risk of failure because our hearts may be impure. In the book of Jeremiah, it says, "The heart is deceitful above all things." This means that we humans have the potential of convincing ourselves that our motivations are pure. But we could be fooling ourselves, which is why we must stop and examine our hearts.
Yeah.
We must look inside and remove the dross in order to create a pure and clean heart that is able to resist succumbing to the temptation of hypocrisy and violence. Let us all have the attitude of the psalmist when he said, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting."
Yes.
When direct action is deemed necessary, we must not shy away from confrontation. However, direct action must only be considered after the first three steps have been thoroughly executed, and it must not be taken lightly. Martin Luther King's call to direct action would require the presenting of their very bodies as a means of laying their case before the conscience of the local and the national community. The social tension that this creates is not one that is destructive, but one that is constructive. To draw a parallel, music is full of tension and release. It is the tension, though, that drives the music forward.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, creative tension, as Dr. King called it, pushes our society towards a dialogue. Direct action is meant to bring an oppressor back to the negotiating table in order to solve an injustice. There are many different avenues of direct action that are effective, such as rallies, letter-writing campaigns, vigils, petitions, fasts, marches, boycotts, and civil disobedience, which is the refusal to obey unjust laws. Martin Luther King said that a just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. But what is my generation to do if the moral law has been thrown out? Without the moral law, how can we make proper judgments? Without God's moral framework, people have differing opinions of right and wrong. God's moral law may not be necessary if everybody had the natural inclination for peace and brotherhood and goodwill. But as we can see from the violence and corruption in the world around us, this is not the case. It is not time for social media to be our primary focus and concern, for that will not give us any sense of direction in this world. It is time that we look to the book that can act as our compass in a world where due north is becoming harder and harder to find. Through MLK's 4 steps of fact collection, negotiation, self-purification, and direct action, it is possible to set free the oppressed and lock in chains the system of injustice. And as a result of the actions of those who fight for justice through love and nonviolent methods, we will see the hearts of men and women change. Martin Luther King said, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend."
Yes.
Love breaks down barriers and builds relationships. I believe that ultimately justice will not be brought about by a government or a ruler or even by legislation. This is not to say that we do not need just laws and authorities. These are vitally important. But these are not the elements that will bring the needed change to your heart and mine. True peace will never come into being through world powers. Love cannot be mandated by a government. Respect does not come from an organization. These things come from the human heart. Let each and every one of us, therefore, bring justice day by day in the part of the world that we touch. This may sound trite, but sometimes the truth is not complicated. We can bring justice around us through the simplicity of acknowledging and respecting one another, listening to one another, and being honest and unselfish with one another. The longing for justice is intrinsic to human nature. Even a small child demands fairness. The desire for all to be regarded with dignity and for everybody to be treated with equity is good. A perfect portrayal of this was exhibited in the life of Jesus Christ, who was humble enough to sit down and have dinner with a tax collector and a prostitute, and also with the religious leaders of the day who were too blind to see his unconditional love for them. Jesus was so fair that he did not exclude himself from suffering, so much so that he endured the punishment of crucifixion, a punishment that neither you nor I could even think of bearing. He went willingly because of his love for all. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. modeled his life and his movement as Jesus did his.
Yes.
Martin Luther King was accused of being an extremist for urging his followers to seek peace and justice through nonviolent direct action. He made a powerful statement when he said that it was not all bad to be considered an extremist. He said, was not Jesus an extremist for love? Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Pray for them that despitefully use you.
Yes.
Therefore, I will pose the same questions that MLK did in his letter from a Birmingham jail. Will we be extremists for hate? Or will we be extremists for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice? Or will we be extremists for the cause of justice? I do not claim to have all the answers, but let us follow in the footsteps of these gentle giants of justice and bring hope to the needy and the forgotten. So when the world shouts at me, take a side, what's your answer? Where will you stand? As was MLK's answer, so was mine. I will stand on the side of love. Thank you.
Yeah! Wow! Woo! Wow! Wow! Bravo! 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 Bravo!
That was the applause for speaking. Let's give him an applause for playing. Wonderful, wonderful job. Thank you so much for those words.